You're live,
Hello,
sir.
everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for a special StormView Live Q&A. I'm Brian Valdez, and joining me from StormView Live is Nathan Moore. Say hi, Nathan.
Hey, everybody, how you doing?
Tonight we have a special guest with us whose achievements include a Bachelor of Science degree in Geology with a concentration in Meteorology from Northern Illinois University. He also earned a master's degree majoring in Atmospheric Sciences as well as a master's degree in Civil Engineering from Texas Tech. He worked part-time at the Institute for Disaster Research at Texas Tech, where he began surveying tornado and hurricane damage. Mr. Marshall has also authored and co-authored various books, such as the Storm Chase Manual, Storm Talk, Tornado Talk, and the Tornado Forecaster's Workbook. Mr. Marshall has also released a few DVDs and had multiple appearances on television programs, including the Discovery Channel, the Learning Channel, the National Geographic Channel, the History Channel, and the Weather Channel. Currently, Mr. Marshall is a principal engineer and meteorologist at Hague Engineering, where he conducts storm damage analysis, amongst other duties. I think we can all agree he's a very accomplished member of the weather community. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Marshall. We've prepared a few questions for you, and we'll be taking a few viewer questions as well. How are you doing this evening?
I'm alive, which is great.
That's good to hear. Okay, for all of our viewers who are watching us online, you can join us at StormView Live. Scroll down to the chat box. We'll be taking a few viewer questions at the closer to the end of the broadcast. All right, let's get started. Mr. Marshall, I think the question a lot of us have on our minds is what inspired your fascination with weather? Was it any one experience, or have you always kind of just been curious?
I've always been interested in weather as far back as I can remember. My parents asked me what I wanted for Christmas. I asked them for a barometer. Took weather readings every day. And then when I was about 10 years old, a tornado F4 strength hit Oklahoma, Illinois. And that kind of shifted my focus from just looking at highs and low temperatures and barometric pressure to tornadoes. And I got to see that damage firsthand. My mother took me around and showed me the destruction. I was amazed. I had no idea what this thing was. A tornado that comes out of the sky and does this destruction. What is this thing?
All right.
They had no clue. They just thought it was simply a matter of something that was out of a cloud, big dark cloud that came down. And they had no idea what caused the tornado, and nobody really had a clue about that. So, curiosity. I wrote to all the local TV weathermen, and I wrote to Dr. Fujita and tried to get some information about this over the years. And they responded. I mean, first the TV weathermen started responding, and Harry Volkman in particular, WGN and NBC. He was with also NBC there. And so that was great. For a little kid that has a barometer, getting a package from the TV weatherman, your icon, was a great thing. So I just set off in that direction and learned all I could about tornadoes.
Cool.
That's really neat. I'm actually from Chicago, and I remember from years ago the name Harry Volkman from WGN. That's pretty neat. That brings back memories.
Yeah, I was in Chicago last night. It's my hometown. I mean, I love it.
Right on. If a strong tornado occurs in an unpopulated land, free of man-made structures, and the winds have shown to be very high, either by actual measurements or radar, and it didn't destroy anything, can this cause the tornado to be demoted to a lower EF rating? How does that work?
Well, the EF scale, strictly speaking, is based off damage. And if there's no damage, then there's nothing you can do to rate it. Now, certainly the El Reno tornado brought up an interesting controversy, is that because mobile radars got great measurements of the wind speeds in tornadoes, although the problem with mobile radars is that they're not sampling like an anemometer would. An EF scale reading is supposed to be at 10 meters above the ground, which is 33 feet, and that's supposed to be over a 3-second period. Well, radars are average measurements that are instantaneous, and they're not at a point, and so that becomes kind of an apples and oranges thing. How are you going to take radar and compare it with wind? It's not one-to-one. You can't do that. You have to have some sort of correction factors. Well, What are those correction factors? We don't know. So it really becomes a big question mark. So that's one of the reasons why El Reno was initially rated EF3 because of the damage. The radar showed well over 200-mile-an-hour winds. I mean, EF5, even if you do some guessing on correction factors, but then again, when it came down, nobody could really pinpoint those correction factors and what they were. So, you know, from a damage perspective, it is EF3, but from a radar perspective, it's probably an EF5 somewhere in there. It's just a tough thing to deal with. And so this is going to continue to happen in the future, I think, and we're going to have to kind of try to remedy this. And I think one of the biggest things we need is low-level wind measurements in tornadoes. Or how are we going to get that? Well, radar is instantaneous, and it's an averaging method. You're not exactly sure at the exact point where you're measuring. So we need probes. We need something in tornadoes that tell us what these low-level winds are. And that still is a big research arena. Let's get some probes in some tornadoes. Let's see what those low-level winds really are.
Yeah. And kind of rolling into that question, considering the fact that we kind of re-rate tornadoes, like you said, based on the varying degrees of destruction they cause, you know, amongst other variables, does the quality of the damaged or destroyed structure's build quality come into play? In other words, will a poor quality building being destroyed cause erroneous ratings due to being more susceptible to destruction at lower wind speeds?
Well, the way the EF scale is designed, even though you see that it has in the document, the actual boxes, there's an app that the Weather Service uses, and it has a sliding scale. So if the user is out there and they see something that they think is a flaw that contributed to the building failing at a lower wind speed, they can lower that bar on there and give it a lower rating or a lower reading. So it's up to the user. It's the person who goes out there needs to know, yeah, not all houses are built well, but then it depends on what that fatal connection was that failed. That's the key. It's not that, oh, this wasn't tied in really well. It's, well, did that contribute or cause that failure? So it's really recognizing the fatal flaws in a building and then having that user adjust it accordingly. So you can get a completely demolished house that's rated EF2 instead of EF5. Very possible.
Okay. So basically, it's not set in stone, say, you know, kind of like they've simplified it. I've seen a lot of simplifications on the internet where people say, you know, when a completely leveled house is nothing's left besides the foundation. I mean, we typically want to tend to rate that an EF5. But if it was a poor quality constructed building, or, you know, even for instance a shed or something like that, I mean, being completely destroyed, that's at the damage surveyor's discretion to kind of take that into account and give it a lower rating. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, and then also taking a step back and looking at the surroundings. I mean, if you see a mailbox that didn't go down and trees are looking okay around the property, it's like, oh, wait a minute now, there's something going on here. There's a reason for this house not being there. Then take a closer look at it. And chances are, and we've seen this time and time again, the house wasn't anchored down to the foundation very well. So then it goes away. And the homes that are built with a platform that have a crawl space are more apt to slide off and have more damage to them at a lower wind speed.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mr. Marshall, with it being storm chasers, many of us take public safety serious and do everything we can to help to keep people safe and give advanced warnings. That's why we're out there. That being said, do you going kind of into the school side of things, do you think that that is not adequate? If there's not adequate storm shelters at schools, should they implement safety programs that allow schools to have like early releases on really, like say day 3 of the SPC right now, where it's looking like it's going to be a big outbreak?
Well, there's a lot of issues here. First of all, should all schools have storm shelters? It'd be great if that were to be the case, but it's a very expensive thing to do. Just in Oklahoma alone, there's well over 1,000 schools in the state, and it costs about $1 million to go ahead and put in a formidable storm shelter. Well, we're talking about billions plus type of dollars. on a storm shelter. And so you've got to be able to convince the people who pay the taxes that that's going to be worthwhile to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not been able to be done. However, communities have taken it upon themselves, and one of the communities that I went up and looked at was Del City, Oklahoma, and they voted for putting in shelters, and the 3 schools that I saw up there had phenomenal storm shelters, and they can hold 700 kids in there and teachers. So I think that's a great idea, but it has to be done on a community-by-community basis, whether or not they want to pass a bond to go ahead and have a shelter put in the school. The other issue brought up was, should they close early and send kids home? A lot of people work, moms and dads, and they don't have the means to have a child all of a sudden be released at noon or 1 o'clock. There's nobody at home, so it's like, what are you going to do there? Sometimes kids are too young, and you don't want to have them at home alone. So you have to have other provisions in place for that. Right now, most of the schools that I'm familiar with have a lockdown where they'll actually prevent the parents from coming to pick up the kids.
Wow.
If a tornado warning is issued. They don't want people streaming in and out of the school when a tornado is approaching, obviously. So they actually lock down the school. They won't even allow the parents to come in and seek shelter. That's some of the strict rules I've seen happen in certain instances. So each tornado, each community is different, and they react differently to the threat. And it's just a matter of what does your community do? Ask the school.
Right.
Very cool. This past December, we were, Brian and myself, we were in Rowlett for the tornado there. And, we get a lot of people that are asking, why such the increase in large destructive tornadoes this December? What factors do you think contributed to everything that happened during that course of the week, December 23rd through the 28th?
Of course, I live here too, and it was very unusual weather. It was a 71 dew point on the morning after Christmas, and that's the dew point. That's not the temperature. Very unusual to see low stratocumulus racing northward. It was like a low spring day. So yeah. I knew there was going to be severe weather that day, and I geared up, and Carson Eads and I went ahead and decided to chase that day. So one of the reasons for that is this El Nino pattern that we're in. It's very low storm tracks, Pacific oriented. We're not getting the Arctic outbreaks. I think our lowest temperature for this winter has been 27 degrees. And that's just below freezing. I mean, it's not, we haven't had any snow or ice really here, and it's been an unusually warm winter. Well, go with that. The Gulf, which is our prime source region for moisture, has remained warm and untouched by Arctic blasts. So it is a tremendous reservoir for this latent heat that we need to set and feed off these storms. And we're going to have a pretty active spring if this keeps up.
Hope so. I definitely hope so. And I'd like to ask a couple of questions about that, that one specific day that we were talking about there in Garland and Rowlett. I live about 2 miles from there, and it's more of a kind of a personal question for myself and some people that I know that live in that community and were affected by it. The death toll, I think, in my mind, could have been a lot, lower and everything, but considering the situation and what happened, do you think there's anything that our specific community, like over there in Garland and Rowlett and all that, is there anything that we could have done to improve our public warning system, early warning system over there in this situation?
Well, I've talked to dozens of people now because I am actively working in those areas, Rowlett and Garland especially, and just last week I was down in the Glen Heights area with that tornado down there. So time after time, though, the story is the same. Yeah, some people heard the warning, but they were looking for secondary confirmation. I'm going to go out and take a look for myself. At night, it's tough. Mm-hmm. But the power lines, is what you're seeing. Well, down in the Heights, Villa area, the tornado was narrow, and they didn't really see it until it was right there on top of it. Up in the Garland Rowlett area, there's plenty of power flashes. The tornado's wider and stronger. That you could see that the tornado was out there and take shelter. But they always look for secondary confirmation. They didn't immediately react with the warning that was issued.
Right.
They would see, is it going to hit me?
And there's a lot of things. I mean, there's something else that's on a lot of our minds. I think a lot of your Facebook followers have seen this, and especially a lot of the people, like I said, that were affected with this damaging tornado. But what, if any, actions have been discussed involving building practices? A few of us, like I said, live in this area, are kind of interested in the findings of the and some of your findings that you've seen, where some of the contractors have taken shortcuts and stuff like that. Has any of the local city officials worked with you guys and trying to change this and trying to do something about some of these practices?
The practices that we're seeing is common. I mean, what we're seeing out there is that houses are not adequately anchored down to their foundations. And of course, the building code comes into play here, and part of this thing. The building code calls for anchor bolts and nuts and washers to be used, but there's also variances that each city can adopt. And a lot of times, cities adopt a shot pin, or a gun that shoots a pin down through the bottom plate. And I don't like it. I'll tell you that right now. I'm not convinced that that does better than an anchor bolt, or even comes close to an anchor bolt in terms of strength. I've seen, on the contrary, when you shoot a pin or dowel into the concrete, it's going to break. The concrete breaks. That falls off. And that's what we've seen time again. So the overturning resistance of a wall is very much compromised. And then, of course, we've seen, worse yet, cut nails being used, which are not supposed to be used ever. And being used. Have you ever tried to nail in the concrete? It's not really fun or easy to do. So, but they're doing it, at least back when these houses were built. Now, the good thing about it is that the older homes that we saw may have had a lot of these problems, but the newer homes that we saw had very few problems. We were seeing anchor bolts being used in Rowlett. We were seeing them with nuts and washers. But then you have the weak link go the next step up, where you have the wall stud straight nailed into the bottom plate, and that's where the failure occurred. The bottom plate remained. So just because you make one of those links in the chain strong doesn't mean that the whole house is good. I mean, you still have the next weak link, which is where that wall stud ties into the bottom plate. So we're seeing kind of still having troubles trying to build houses right, to at least give some sort of resistance here. And there's even a conflict within the building code, which I'm not going to go into too much, but on one hand, the building code says you've got to build to 90 mile an hour, that's 3-second gusts, but on the other hand, it still goes with straight nail connections, which are not going to be able to resist the lateral uplift forces on the wall. So we have a conflict within the code, and it just needs to be a better understanding. I've always promoted 3 things. You want to bolt your house to the foundation. You want to have solid wall sheathing to make a box. You want to strap down the rafters to the wall top. Those 3 things makes a big, big difference. Yes, it's above code, but still, it's much better to have an above code house, and it doesn't cost that much.
All right. Well, I hope that they, with what they've seen in the destruction of that tornado, that they've kind of worked on some changes in their procedures. So,
did you ever, when you're assessing that, did you ever come across that this could be rated an EF5 tornado?
No, not in any of these tornadoes. In fact, what we were really debating about is whether it was EF4 even. The damage in Garland was just borderline, if that. 3 houses there on Crest Point. They were 2-story, and they were reduced down to nothing, no wall standing or anything. And that was the area that we decided that could be rated at EF4. It was slightly stronger than we saw in the Glen Heights area. But they still had problems with these houses. The houses were not attached very well. But the fact that they were two-story and that three of them were together and they had ample damages to kind of make it up there. I mean, the EF4 rating would be all walls down. And normally that would be a no-brainer, but these houses had some construction issues which called into question whether we should even go with an EF4. But the Weather Service decided that they would do that because this tornado was stronger than the one down in Glen Heights, although it still was a violent tornado down in Glen Heights.
Yeah. What are some suggestions you have for our viewers to prepare for the upcoming severe weather season?
Pay attention. I mean, that's really one of the keys here. A lot of people were out doing, it's Christmas time. They were out thinking about Christmas, the day after Christmas, and driving around, and they were just kind of oblivious to the fact that tornadoes can happen in December. They can happen at any time of year. I think Mother Nature's calling card is when you have a 71 dew point, winds are bucking out of the south, and you've got strobing strato Q streaming north. That, to me, is, hello,
Yeah.
it's time to pay attention. If the sky now gets dark and, you're starting to see lightning and thunder out there, turn on a TV. Find out social media. What's going on? I have a simple little radar app on my phone. I mean, I'm going to find out what's going on. You should too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We were where we were positioned when we were filming that tornado. We were looking right over the lake there, and it was coming across. And the thing that was the most stunning to me as it was coming across is just seeing all the traffic going down the interstate. And hit the nail on the head with just being alert.
Well, that's the thing with today with radio kind of being a secondary kind of source. Everybody's got their CDs on, or they're really listening to other music, maybe an iPhone with the earplugs. They're kind of tuned out to what's really happening, and of course, most of the time you're just hearing music on the radio, anyways. So it's very difficult when you're driving to find out what's going on unless you actually are alerted to the fact. And again, it's the day after Christmas. It's dark. People are worried about, just getting home or going to the mall, watch a movie, whatever. And they're not thinking about tornadoes. Are you kidding? That's why it wasn't too surprising that most of the people who were killed in this tornado were in vehicles. I was driving on I-30 myself, and I could not believe what I was seeing. Cars were driving right into the tornado. They were oblivious. I could see the power flashes off to the right, moving towards, but people weren't oblivious to it, and in a way, it was sort of good for us because we were able to get out of there fairly quickly because there wasn't a traffic jam.
All right.
We realized there was a tornado, they would have stopped.
Wow, that's crazy. There's always, you always hear these stories of weird phenomenon that occur during tornadoes. What is something that you have seen? It's kind of a three thing, but what have you seen that is kind of the strangest experience you have had that you've seen during your damage assessment?
Well, we see a lot of debris thrown around. We see some unusual things. We go along and you see the manhole covers off the streets, and it's like, how does a tornado pick that up? It's kind of interesting how the airflow has to work in the storm sewer to pick up the. Have you ever tried to lift the sewer cover? It's very difficult to do.
They're pretty heavy.
It's like, how does a tornado do that? Simple and easy. There's always seen some very strange things like that. The parking curbs, too. I've seen, you go in and concrete parking curb weighs a couple 100 pounds. Sometimes they have steel dowels that kind of attach them into the pavement. But we've seen them taken up and thrown around. It's pretty low level wind, man, when you're thinking about it. What is it? take for a wind to lift those parking curbs or storm sewer covers up right there at the ground.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Do you have any other like bizarre storm stories from your experiences that that just kind of stick out from amongst the others?
I need to write a book. I've got a lot of them. I mean,
I imagine.
I used to storm chase before this thing called the internet came up, and it was like go out there and fly by wire visually. You know, there's a lot of things that have happened out there in storm chasing. I mean, we've had times where you know, the road was closed for a bridge out or something, and we're stuck. Uneasy or fun feeling. You know, storm chasing is dangerous. We have to keep pushing that. And even if you think that you're seasoned and you know what you're doing, you can get into trouble just like anybody can. You know, it's a shame that we've lost some storm chasers that were very seasoned and were very safety conscious. But you're playing with tornadoes that don't always go in a straight line. They can turn, they can curve, they can widen, they can accelerate, they can decelerate. They can play a bunch of tricks on you that can wreak havoc with your chasing and trying to see it. You know, El Reno was probably the scariest chase I've had in recent memory because of that. The tornado really was going all kinds of directions on me, and I was having a tough time trying to chase this thing and see it. So it was a close call for me as well.
Yeah, I imagine so. I guess we can go ahead and take a few viewer questions, Nathan. You got any questions on here?
Yeah, let me pull up our deal here. Maybe. If I can get to it. Let's see here. All right, so this is from Irene, and it's, in your opinion, if you're on the road and there's a tornado and no shelter, is it better to find a ditch or stay in the car buckled in and head protected?
Great question. Really, you don't want to be in a car in a tornado, but then again, you really don't want to be outside. So, I mean, if you don't have very much time to react, stay in the vehicle, get down underneath the dashboard if you can. Typically, cars roll, tumble, and they'll throw you out. It's very difficult, even with a seatbelt on, to stay in the vehicle. They'll just throw you out when they start rolling. But at the same time, if you're out in the open, we've seen a lot of people that have been injured severely, if not killed, by all the debris flying around. Tornadoes are not clean wind. There's stuff flying around, cars rolling over on people. I mean, we've seen that too. So, you know, it's really a choice that is difficult to make, and you have to make it right there at the heat of the moment. There's no rule that says get out of your car or stay in your car. Obviously, if the tornado is at quite a distance away and you can have access to a building to get into, well, then do that. But if the tornado is right there on top of you, you don't have much time to react, stay in your car.
All right, got another question from Lunalight. Question for all. I'm not a storm chaser, but a weather-loving person in a science way. I am still moved by the El Reno outbreak and looking for footage all around try to understand what insane power Mother Nature can create. The terrible loss of all the storm victims and chasers is still present in my mind. What do you think about this day, and how much has this changed your life as a chaser?
Well, as far as the El Reno event, certainly it brings to mind that storm chasing is for the young, and maybe I'm getting a little too old for doing this, because I've done it consecutively now since 1976, and it's like, well, maybe it is for the young, you know, after all. Then again, El Reno, you know, really put the test to me. Could I really get in, film it, and get out of there? It was not an easy chase by any means. And so for those people who are interested in storm chasing, read all you can about it, and also go with some people who are storm chasers to help, so that you have a better understanding of the dangers that are involved. You know, most of storm chasing, though, is boring. most of it is dangerous in terms of driving long distances. You have a better chance of getting in an accident than you do getting run over by the tornado. So there's a lot of hazards.
Yeah, we spoke about that a lot in some of our past Q&As. You know, like some of the most dangerous times when you're chasing out there can actually be other chasers and traffic and having big chaser convergences and such. So it can be dangerous.
What do you think? There's on the sides of the roads in Kansas, there's storm shelters that are out there being built. Do you think that's something that in Oklahoma and Texas you'll start seeing happening?
It's possible. They need to prevent the vehicles from parking on the highway, though. That's one of the things. They maybe have a pull-off area or something. But then again, like a rest area, they're always few and far between. I mean, until you have a tornado cross your path, then you have to have them every few miles. And I don't think that again, it becomes a cost issue. Can you put tornado shelters out there and enough parking for everybody every few miles?
Yeah. I got another one from Nick Panico. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name there. They want to know what your opinion is on some type of mandatory weather and severe weather preparation course in the school curriculum. It says that kids are far more likely to learn about home. Let me see here. They're far more likely to learn about it from the teachers than they would be from their parents. And he thinks that they should start teaching that in school. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm all for it. I myself was in high school when over the intercom they said, "Hey kids, anybody interested in forming a weather club? Let's meet after school at 3:30 or whatever, 4 o'clock, and we'll get together and see if there's enough people for a weather club." And I went. I thought, well, this is cool. I'd like to be in a weather club. And we all were amazed at the number of people who have the same passion. But overall, and in fact, we were able to get so much interest in it, we actually got the school administrator to have a course on weather.
Awesome.
And a class of 35 kids in this course on weather, and we decoded weather observations, we plotted weather maps, we took tours down to the TV studios, and it was great. Built weather stations. I just did a wonderful thing for high school to have a weather club and then have a weather course. I think it's just ask your school administrators about that. Then overall, as far as safety is concerned, I think every school needs to have some sort of safety plan and go over it with kids. Certainly you have a fire drill, and in those fire drill situations, you get out of the building and you meet at a certain location outside the building. You certainly don't want to do that in a tornado, right? So you want to have tornado safety rules, which are opposite that of fire. It's where do you go in the school building and what do you need to do to protect yourself, get down low, put as many walls between you and the outside, all that's great stuff. But it needs to be drilled into kids to do that. And I like science fairs. I think I took part in them, and I found them very motivating. So teachers, I had a great opportunity, and I was just a city kid. And here I had all this great stuff to stimulate my interest in science, and I think it worked out great. I'm so glad that there was this kind of curriculum that happened. The teachers, the school, all were receptive to it. The science fairs, all good things to get involved with.
Great.
I remember when I was little, and it was when we went to the science fairs, the only thing I always was hoping, are we going to have something weather-related? And and then it'd be like something like chemistry, and then it disappointed me. But
I had, science fair was open. I went and I won the top prize for my tornado exhibit. I had built a tornado model, and my father was a jeweler. He had jewelry cases that spun around, and I took a bunch of cotton balls and put them on these spinning jewelry cases and sprayed them up black and put them in a nice diorama, and it worked great. I got a top prize for this sort of tornado exhibit that I made as a 7th grader.
That's awesome. Catherine is asking, what is the worst tornado damage that you have seen?
I've seen some really horrific destruction in a couple of instances. Joplin was certainly one of the top in my career. It was 6 square miles of no houses. And you can take a big chunk of the town and just level it. I could stand on a hill there and look in all 4 directions and not see a single house standing. That was sobering to me. Gerald was also very sobering in the fact that, yes, it was rural, and there was a small community out there that was completely gone, but the scouring of the landscape. There was a slow-moving tornado moving at only about 9 or 10 miles an hour, large tornado, and it scoured the surface off the fields and scoured grass, scoured road surfaces, nubbed up the trees down to just the trunks. So it was an extremely violent tornado as well. So both Gerald and Joplin were some of the most intense tornadoes I've ever seen.
Okay, Gary Nacy is asking a question. He wants to know, to your knowledge, what is the longest duration that you have known for a tornado to be on the ground?
I think our tornadoes that have been on the ground for over an hour are rare. We've seen them, though. They travel long distances, usually, because they're being propelled by a jet stream and a storm that's moving fairly rapidly. So they can cover a lot of ground. I mean, the tri-state tornado was a long-track tornado. It may have been more than one. Looks like it was. But still, it was on the ground a very long time. And we've seen in recent years tornadoes lasting an hour or more on the ground.
Did you were you on the Greensburg tornado?
I was not on the tornado. I avoided the storm. I started out in Greensburg that day, but at sunset I decided that, well, it's the end of the chase. But there was a cell developing along I-70 to the north, so I went north to I-70, and that storm didn't do anything. So I saw the storm develop in the Texas Panhandle, move up through the Oklahoma Panhandle and become tornadic, and I didn't want to deal with that, although I had to get back to Liberal. That's where my motel was. So I had to come back south, and instead of going in front of it, I had the chance to do it. I could get in front of this and see a nighttime tornado. I opted not to, and to stay back behind it and skirted the very west edge of it to get down to my hotel that night.
Did you do any damage assessment? The person here is asking how the grain elevator managed to survive that tornado.
Yeah, the grain elevator is a steel-reinforced concrete structure, cylindrical, and it did quite well. I mean, the tornado went right over it, and it did lose some of the roofing on the grain elevator. The Greensburg tornado was a big, damaging tornado, EF5, but just barely EF5. It was on the ground a fairly long time and did a loop at the end of its path. And the next tornado after it was actually stronger than the Greensburg tornado. But it didn't hit much of anything, just a few houses out there. But the amount of scouring I could see told me that it was every bit as strong, if not stronger, than Greensburg. So, yeah, I surveyed it. I was up there. So I went over to the Dodge City Weather Office. They said they were not going to do an aerial survey because they didn't have either the funds or the contacts for it. So I went across the street and asked a person there if I could rent a plane and pilot and fuel and go up there and fly over it, and I did. Went ahead and Greensburg, Kansas, and wrote a paper about it too. It was a great survey that we did there, looking at every house from the air and the ground.
Very nice. Jessica Klein's got a question, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase here. Basically, what's the safest place that you can go in a house if you've got an approaching tornado?
Well, if you have a basement, obviously you want to go to the basement and put yourself underneath something that's formidable, like a table, strong table. Even take some plywood, put it up against the washer dryer, and crawl underneath that cavity. Because most of the people who die or killed in tornadoes are crushed or hit by debris. And you want to protect yourself from flying and falling debris. If you don't have a basement, then I would suggest that you put as many walls between you and the outside as possible. The best place would be an interior bathroom, because there's additional plumbing in the walls that help anchor it down. And, of course, keep in mind that most tornadoes, in fact, the vast majority of all tornadoes, are not going to be level in a house. They are the weaker style tornado. It's only the top-end tornadoes, those 1% or less, that are the really violent ones that can level houses. So definitely you want to get to a center of the house, lowest floor. Put as many walls between you and the outside as possible. All good tips.
Being as you've surveyed a lot of the damage on these houses and stuff, and actually seen firsthand what they're capable of, does a house being a two-story have any effect on that plan that you just spoke about? I mean, when I think of a tornado level in a house, I mean, I don't know, maybe this is just my my own personal fear, but to me it would seem like having a two-story house, you'd be more susceptible to being the house caving in and collapsing on you. Is that not the case? I mean, will it still apply to a central room?
It all depends on how your house is constructed. I mean, yes, sticking up above the neighbors, we saw in Rowlett, in fact, the two-story houses really got hit hard. And if one block, in fact, I saw a two-story house, a one-story house, and a two-story house. The two-story houses got hit hard, but the one-story house actually benefited from having the two-story houses on either side of it, protecting it in a way. So you can get some shielding from your neighboring house if it's two-story. It doesn't bode well for the two-story house. It didn't do so well. Typically, winds are strongest at the top, so you're going to lose a roof or the exterior walls. And if you don't have a good, solid locking platform on the side of your house to second floor versus the first floor, you don't want to have a joint in there. You want them solidly sheathed. If not, your house can collapse, like the house of cards that I talk about a lot. So you want to make sure that you have a formidable protection there. And still, if you have a two-story house, lowest floor, center, always the best place.
Awesome.
All right, this is a good one. Did you do? I guess the first thing I'll ask you: did you do any damage assessment on the Rochelle tornado?
I did not get up to Rochelle. I did see the video from it. It was a phenomenal tornado, and several chasers were on it that I know. So it was a nice-looking tornado from a size standpoint, and it did some scouring in the fields. I could see that on some of the aerial imagery that was posted online. But no, I did not survey.
Okay, so the question is, how do they get to the point where they can rate a tornado 1 mile per hour short of being EF5?
Well, do you have an example that they did that?
I know, but it's from what we read, I guess, back then. They said it was, they rated it at 199 miles an hour, 1 mile per hour short of being EF5. That's just what we had heard, or that this person had heard.
Yeah, I'm on a committee right now. We're going to modify some of those wind speeds. We cannot, by any scientific reason, get to 1 mile per hour accuracy because, again, tornado damage is an indirect measurement, and it's also a bound by which we don't know if the tornado winds were stronger. I mean, the damage is the lower bound. The house fails. Could the winds have been stronger than that? Sure, it could have been stronger. We don't know because the house has already failed. We need something to survive in order to get an upper bound. So otherwise, we don't really have a handle on that. With miles per hour, though, if you can get within 10 miles an hour, I'd be surprised. I mean, really, it's difficult to get that kind of accuracy, and it's just an estimate, and estimates have errors.
Okay.
All right. Tommy Scanlon's got one. He says he works in a store with no basement. He's basically wanting to know if like a beer cooler or a dairy cooler or something like that it would be the safest place to go. And like some of your larger structure buildings that don't have many walls besides the outer core walls. If you find yourself caught out in public in a situation like that, like at a Walmart or something, where would be the best place to seek shelter in that kind of situation?
Well, certainly beer coolers are great places to be. We've seen a number of examples of that. There's a video online in Joplin where there's a convenience store right in front of the Walmart. The convenience store was where people sought shelter in the cooler, and they all survived in there, although the store was destroyed. So the coolers provide additional protection. They're not foolproof by any means, and they're not registered storm shelters. But again, when you're looking for where the more formidable place is in the building, yeah, a cooler would be great. If you're in a big box building, like a Walmart, like a Home Depot or a Lowe's, there are no real safe places to be in those buildings because they're not storm shelters. And unless they have a place of safety, well, that's probably going to be the restrooms or a workroom back there. Certainly the smallest place you can get in the back of the building is relatively the safest place you could be. But they're not storm shelters, never were intended to be that.
What is your thoughts on Tornado Alley moving north and because of the climate change? What's your beliefs on that?
Well, it's going to be interesting. I think more in terms of climate change, if we're going to get the pattern shift in the weather such that, like an El Nino, we're going to prevent the Arctic bursts that we're getting and get more storm systems just working west to east. I mean, that really is more of a key. Certainly global warming has maybe some indirect role to play by having warmer waters, and then you're going to have then more storm activity from that. But you need to have those waves in the atmosphere. Global warming itself isn't going to do it. You need to have storm systems that develop with those waves. So, and those waves need to come in periodically. So we're having now a very active pattern. But if you have a ridge over the west, that'll shut it down. No matter how warm it gets, I mean, it can get really, really hot. We're not going to get storms out there.
This leads me into the second kind of part of this question. And Tim, he's up in the UK, and he is wondering if it's, with the climate change, if there's ever going to be a possibility of seeing strong tornadoes in the UK and Ireland.
I have had the great accomplishment of being called over to Birmingham, England, to look at their tornado. That was a strong tornado that hit Birmingham, and I surveyed that, and it was equivalent to probably almost a 3, EF3, and our scales are very strong too. And so they can happen in the UK. UK does see a lot of weaker tornadoes, but just like the US, we also get a lot of weaker tornadoes. It's the strong ones that are very rare, but they certainly can happen in the UK. I've seen where the Netherlands has been hit by a violent tornado. I've seen Romania get hit. Italy, we've seen videos about that online. Germany, so we've seen a lot of tornadoes. Even France. The whole UK area is prone for violent tornadoes. It's rare for them to occur. They don't occur with as much frequency as they do here, but then again, they can occur.
Awesome. And this is kind of a question of mine too, but this is from Sharon. What are some of the more common misconceptions about tornadoes that you think the public should be aware of and learn that are absolutely just myths?
Well,
like as far as like inner cities and
yeah, myths are tough to combat because they get handed down. You know, we've heard the stories like tornadoes don't cross rivers, they don't hit cities. There's an Indian burial ground there. They're not going to go. It's like, what are you talking about? This tornado has no idea if there's a city in the way or not. It has no idea if there's a river in the way or a hill. the tornado will do what it wants to do. It doesn't care what's in its way.
And it don't care if it's the day after Christmas and the middle of winter or any of those things.
Tornadoes don't care.
What's your theory on being a storm chaser? There's a lot of misconception out there about parking underneath overpasses.
That's a big myth. It's a shame that, yes, there's a video in 1991 that is online still today where a reporter went ahead and told people to get underneath the overpass, and they survived. So that must be true all the time, 100%, right? No. We've seen people get killed under these overpasses. Why leave the safety of your car, get outside, and get up underneath an overpass? Most of those overpasses today, you can't do that unless you're a good climber. And then what are you going to do? Some of them you can't get between the girders. I mean, it's the older structures you could do that. But now you have a vertical wall for an abutment. You can't climb that thing. And even if you could, a lot of times the beams are too close together.
Right. I got a question from Gary. If somebody wanted to get into doing storm damage assessment and kind of the stuff that you do, what would you recommend to them? Where would you recommend them to start?
Well, certainly there's the internet. There's a great place to start. You can go in and access a tremendous amount of information. The National Weather Service provides Storm Spotter online guides. You can go and search for those. Certainly learn all you can. There's a COMET program, which is meteorology online. You can get involved with at COMET. So the government has a tremendous resource. I like the FEMA site for safety and protection. FEMA is a great library there that they have information about building a shelter in your home. That is great. So look at FEMA sites, look at COMET, look at the National Weather Service, which is your Storm Prediction Center, your National Hurricane Center, your National Weather Service locally. All those are great sites.
All right, looks like we have time for about one more question, Nathan.
All right. Ryan wants to know, and he is actually part of our StormViewLIVE team. In your opinion, is there a trend of more extreme tornadoes that is occurring, like a Reno, Pilger, and etc., or are we just more aware of them because of all the chasers and the video and the live streaming going on right now?
I think in the long term, we have not seen very much in the way of the tornado numbers going up in violent tornadoes. I think the smaller reports are going up because there's more people out there to see them. I mean, I've heard of my relatives saying, "Oh, we had one come last week and, tear up some trees down in the river valley." Well, it's like, did you report it? No. It's like, tore up some trees and didn't hurt anything. So it's like, but more today, you're going to have a snow spotter out there, and he's going to see that thing, and he's going to report it. And, most tornadoes are fairly brief. They last maybe a few minutes, travel less than a mile. I mean, most of those never have gotten reported in the past, and now they're getting more and more. So it's funny, though, if you look at the trend, there are more tornadoes out there being reported, but some years are quite low, just depending on the weather patterns that are out there. I mean, you've got to have those storms out there for tornadoes to be produced.
Good news, good information. Okay, everyone, that's going to wrap up our live Q&A session for the evening. I'd like to thank all our viewers for joining us and participating with the Q&A. Guys, you can check out Mr. Marshall's page on Facebook. I highly recommend that. He posts there pretty frequently. He's very interactive with his followers. Again, thank you, Mr. Marshall, for joining us. And I think I speak for everyone here at StormViewLIVE and all of our viewers as well when we say we appreciate you sharing your time and knowledge with us. All right, everybody. We'll talk to y'all later.
Bye-bye.